call the meeting to order. Mr. Colby, can you note that all commissioners are present?
So noted.
Okay, everyone should have received a copy of the minutes. If everything was okay in the minutes, can I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? We're going to move straight into our official action. I want to recognize Commissioner Herbert for the nominating committee report.
This year's nominating process for the term beginning January 1, 2017 began in January of this year, 2016, when the online application became available on KUB's website. The committee met in August, and advertisements ran in the News Sentinel that month. Unfortunately, we're having to replace Eston, who I think might be irreplaceable. He's in his second term and is ineligible to serve again, and I know that all the board members are going to miss him and have enjoyed serving with him like I have. The committee reviewed all of the submitted applications and identified qualified applicants to interview. The charter requires that the board provide the mayor at least 5 nominees for each commissioner vacancy, and the nominating committee this year brings this recommendation to the board for the nominees: Johnny Cannon, Wade Davies, Ford Little, Tyvee Small, and Petey Wilson.
Okay, you've heard the recommendations of the nominating committee. I'd like to ask Mark Walker and the board's great secretary to distribute the ballots, please.
Commissioners, as a quick reminder, you do vote by written ballot, and when you are finished voting, if you would please sign your name at the bottom. And please do vote for at least 5 candidates, and you may select from those recommended by the nominating committee or any other applicant on the ballot, or you may write in a candidate if you wish. And the names of the 5 individuals receiving the majority of the votes will be submitted to the mayor. After a quick tally, Chair Thompson, the names of the 5 individuals receiving a majority of the votes are Johnny Cannon, Wade Davies, Ford Little, Tyvee Small, and Petey Wilson.
These 5 names will be submitted to the mayor, who will select one to nominate to city council. Thank you, the nominating committee, for your work conducting this process this year. And we're going to go on to Resolution 1350, authorizing the condemnation and taking the electric utility easement in support of KUB's Hoskins Valley Electric System upgrade. Samantha.
Commissioners, as you know, from time to time, we need to get condemnation authority in order to do our work. This is a Century 2 project in Union County, and I'll recognize Paul Randolph to give you the details.
Thank you. This property that we're looking at for the condemnation authority today is actually located in Union County. It is a project part of our Century 2 electric distribution improvement work, and we'll be replacing a single phase or a single line electric distribution overhead wire with a 3-phase wire as well. And it's actually fed out of our recently upgraded mainable substation. This is a Hogskin Valley Road in Union County, as I spoke. The project length is connecting to another 3-phase line here and extending to this area, and that is about a mile in length. There's only 5 parcels that we needed easements from. We've secured 4 of those, and we just are seeking the authority on the 1 parcel here. And that is because this is on an existing pole line. So we have an existing single-phase line, as I mentioned, so we're upgrading. So we had to add a few extra poles and some guide wires as well when the easement work done. The original line was built in actually 1950, so it is 66 years of age. 5,700 feet, 25 poles, 4 easements acquired. The one remaining, we had the appraisal done at $750 offer, and the customer is looking for $20,000 while we're here today for the condemnation Resolution 1350 provides for the authority. It also allows us to continue to negotiate with the property owner, all costs paid by the electric division, of course, and enables construction to begin, as you noticed there, in January 15th is the planned schedule.
Are there any questions?
What's the process? I mean, we grant you authority, or we grant the company authority, and then we just simply notify the landowner? Or
Paul, you may want, there's been significant discussion with this property owner to this point, and KUB's been directed to their counsel. I discussed it with him. We've provided what is KUB's proposal, and this is dispute over money, and the damages they seek are well in excess of what KUB thinks is reasonable in circumstances. There's been a deadline that's beyond this meeting given for a response. In the event that there is no response or they can't come together, then this action will authorize KUB to direct your attorney to file condemnation action.
And one other question, there are already existing poles, and this is the issue that this person has, that we're putting an additional pole in front of his house or her house? Or
I don't think it's additional policy.
There's an existing line there, so the property is encumbered by the overhead line already. So we're replacing a single wire there with the 3 wires on those. There is a pole that is being placed in proximity, on the property area.
Was there already a pole there?
There is a pole there already today. This is just a different location.
Net zero change for that person.
There's needs sometimes when you put more structures on the pole line for wire sag, et cetera. You've got to place additional poles sometimes, or anchors for poles that didn't have anchors before.
But on this particular landowner's property, there's no.
Yeah, he has a pole at one corner of his property now. The new pole is placed at a different location.
Heard all I need to. Thank you.
If there's not any more questions, I will request a motion and a second for Resolution 1350 on first and final reading.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Coley, could you please call roll?
Commissioner Askew,
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton, Commissioner Herbert,
Aye.
Commissioner Pennell,
Aye.
Commissioner Thompson,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Commissioner Warden. Aye. Resolution 1350 is it 1350?
Yes, sir.
Has passed.
We'll go straight into the President's report. I want to recognize Linda.
Commissioners, let me take you back to last month and remind you that we had a somewhat lengthy presentation on Pace 10 and Century 2, what we had accomplished over the past 10 years and how we had funded that. Today we're going to start the conversation with you about going forward. The intent is to have a plan to present to you in April, but we'll have several meetings of discussion about this. So I'll recognize Mark Walker to talk to you about the next 10 years. These are the 10 years looking outward, not looking backwards. So I'll recognize Mark Walker.
Commissioners, as Ms. Roach stated, today really is the first of several discussions we're going to have over the coming months about looking forward over the next 10 years, and in particular looking at our Century 2 programs over that period of time and the levels and types of investments that are in the plan, and also how we would fund those investments as well. So plenty of opportunity for discussion. Today is considered to be really a starting point for that. And since it's a starting point, I thought I'd just begin with a brief reminder of why we're all here in the first place, and of course that is to serve our customers. You know, our blueprint says that KUB exists to serve our customers by providing utility services that are safe, reliable, and affordable. And that is our vision statement. And I think we go a long way to accomplish that vision by taking care of the resources that are entrusted to us and investing our customers' dollars wisely in the utility system assets that provide them services to their households and to their businesses. And Ms. Roach talked about last month we looked back, and we did look back at the last 10 to 12 years and the various investments we've made in our systems and how we funded those investments. And I think first and foremost there was Pace 10. And Pace 10 was established to help meet the collection system improvement requirements imposed on the system by the federal consent decree imposed on the wastewater system. As Mr. Elmore talked about last month, we did that on time, we did that on budget, a very significant accomplishment. But Pace 10 really also opened the door and paved the way for Century 2 to be implemented. And that came from the board as far as an instruction to say, what happened to wastewater, we do not want to happen to electric, natural gas, or the water systems. So staff in response developed long-term replacement programs for key assets for the systems and shared that with the board and built that into funding plans going forward. In our financial plans, we used to have 5-year plans. That shifted to a 10-year plan when Century 2 at Phase 10 came along. So that was really a longer term, which we felt was necessary because you need to have that certainty and know about the funding really that far in advance. So that was important. And those funding plans really evolved into more of a balanced funding approach using debt and a combination of debt and rates, particularly for the wastewater system. We leveraged up quite a bit and used higher levels of debt, and then evolved into having smaller annual rate increases. And then I think cost management became more of a focus for KUB over the last 10 years, in part because as we were increasing our capital budgets, we were seeing slowing customer growth and usage for residential and business customers declining a little bit each year. So cost management helps offset that. It becomes a component of really funding the programs. So where are we today? I think those investments that we've made over the last 10 years have paid off and have produced more efficient and more safe and reliable systems for our customers. I think the means that we've chosen to fund those, a balanced approach, a fiscally responsible approach, has kept our systems financially sound. And I think that's reflected by the high-quality bond ratings we have and multiple upgrades we've received over the course of the past decade. But it's also helped keep our rates competitive and relatively affordable for our customers as well, which is vitally important. So how do our customers see that? Well, we shared with you the results of the recent customer satisfaction survey. And I think if you go back with Phase 10 and with Century 2, we've been very transparent with our customers and done tons of communications about what's going on. And I think they understand our approach and appreciate it, and it's paid off in better service for them. And we had the highest residential and business scores that we've ever received for overall customer satisfaction. So to some extent, you could say we're in a good place, and I think we are. But there's much, much work to be done, and Century 2 does need to continue. And when we, as you know, I guess before we get into the plans, just a little bit of a step back on Century 2. It is about replacing aging infrastructure. It is about maximizing the useful life of our utility system assets. But it's not just for the sake of doing it. Why are we doing it? It is for the long-term benefit of our customers. And I think it helps to always keep that in mind. When we started developing Century 2 programs and the long-term replacement cycles, for each system there were some key assets, some portions of the system, a type of cable, a type of pipe that was maybe more problematic than others, more prone to failure than others. So when we designed our programs, we made that a priority to try and get those assets out of the system in a reasonable time frame. And some examples of that on this chart for electric, for example, what we call cross-linked polyethylene underground cable. That type of cable, that as it gets older, is more prone to break. When it does break, it's difficult to repair, and it takes time to repair. So outages tend to be a little bit longer term for that. So since we've had Electric Century 2, we've replaced about 60% of that, and there's about another 40% to go. And if you see the color code here on this chart, blue is what's already been completed, Century 2 or Phase 10 today. The light orange is what's in the 10-year plan, and then the gray is what's remaining. So that's an example for electric. For natural gas, our cast iron and ductile iron main, a longer-term replacement program that was really in place before Century 2 came along for the gas system. We've almost got all of that out of our system, just actually a couple of miles left of the cast iron and ductile iron main. And for example, on the water system, galvanized main, we've talked a lot about that. That is a primary source of breaks and leaks on the water system. Our goal is to have all of that out of the system in the next 10 years, actually by 2021. So within these long-term replacement programs, there are certain key assets that we focused on, try to get that out as soon as possible. But really make no mistake, Century 2 it's not only long-term, it was really developed to be a perpetual program. And that's really the thought I want to leave you with on this particular slide, is it's not finite. It's not, okay, when we get cross-link cable out, electric system can take a break, or we get galvanized out, water system can take a break. That's simply not the case. It is perpetual. And I like this chart here because it shows the circle, sort of the never-ending. Poles, for example, That's what we've done in 10 years, or in the program to date. The next 10 years, we'll do about 20% of our poles, which is 130,000 total. But once that's finished, we still have 70% of our electric system poles to replace. And 2% per year, that's 35 years that will take to complete that. And the point is, once you've done that, you begin the process again. And for water main, we have about a quarter of our system upgraded by the end of the next 10 years, but replacing 1% per year going forward, that's 75 years to complete the cycle, and you begin again. And really the same on wastewater. Yes, ma'am.
What portion of materials can be salvaged and for reuse another life, and what goes to, I imagine the concrete pipe might go to a landfill or something. I think I've asked this before, but I forgot. I think that maybe you recycle the poles.
The poles, we do have recycle programs in place for that. As far as the different types of pipe that we remove from the system, I'm really not sure about that. I'd have to check on that. I believe we dispose of that, but
We currently have a deal with IMS for poles, right? IMS is taking our poles and using it on their properties, so we're always looking for ways to reuse it.
Pipe is not typically recycled, though. It normally comes apart on you when you're pulling it out after it's aged anyway, and so you have to, by hand, pretty much distinguish between the soil and the pipe, and so we don't really have a good recycling program for that.
key point, long-term, build perpetual. So now we get to the point of looking at our 10-year plans for each of the 4 systems. And again, just emphasize starting point. Show you a lot of numbers, show you dollar amounts attached to certain programs over the next 10 years. Then we'll look at the funding as well. But today we're just beginning the discussions on this. But high-level overview of what you're going to see, continuation of Century 2 for all 4 systems, essentially at the pace that it's been going at. A continued funding approach that's balanced using a combination of debt and rates. But what you'll see with respect, in particular to wastewater, is that once we pass the consent decree and the completion of that, you're going to see the debt ratio begin to decline for the wastewater division. And actually that division begin to have some financial flexibility that it really hasn't had in some years. And you'll also see the level of rate increases get smaller over time, in particular for wastewater and electric and water. For gas, it's going to start out smaller than it has been and stay that way over the 10 years. At least that's a starting point for what we're going to talk about. So we'll start with the electric system. And we do have a map of each of the 4 systems when we have one of these for each system. Electric system, as you know, I guess certainly covers about 700 square miles, so the biggest of our system territories by far. Knox County, most of Knox County, covers portions of 6 other counties, some of it very small like Blount County and Anderson County. In total, about almost 200,000 total electric services. 90% of those are residential. A couple of key stats, 86% of the households in our entire service territory have KUB electric service. Now that's not electric service territory, that's everything put together, gas, water, wastewater, and electric. And 36% of those households have electric service only from KUB. That's the only KUB service that they have. But a 10-year plan that again is focused on investments that continue for the safe and reliable operation of the system. So the replacement programs we'll talk about, poles, substations, overhead transmission lines, etc., continue. But a big part of this plan is also the grid modernization initiative that has been implemented, and that is replacing 200,000 electric meters. It's also doing a lot for distribution automation and really trying to automate the electric system so we can respond and restore power outages quicker than ever before. That's a key part of that. But there's quite a few dollars in here for the electric share of the grid mod project. So some of the key system investments for the electric system, and I won't go through all of these, but if you have a question, just for the sake of time, but we talked about poles replacing 2% per year. There's $69 million in the plan to replace 26,000 poles, 2,600 a year on average. Within that, we talked about prioritization. There can be a mix. Wood poles, steel poles, concrete poles, and we prioritize that based upon the age and the situation of the pole, but 2,600 a year on average. Our overhead transmission lines, we have $105 million to really complete a project we started a few years ago. We have about 270 miles of high voltage, 69 kV transmission lines in our system. We've replaced about 70 or upgraded about 70 miles of that. The rest of it is in this 10-year plan. Some of those lines go back, I think, to the 1930s. So we do want to upgrade those, and that is a priority for the electric system. Substations, we have, I guess, a total of $75 million in the plan for various substation projects, including the construction of 5 new substations. One of those will be a new in-feed station. That's where we get power directly from TVA. I think it's going to be located off of Western Avenue, and it'll serve the northwestern portion of our territory, designed to provide additional capacity for future growth and also give operational flexibility as well. We have a total of about 66, I think, substations in our system in total, and I guess that'll make it close to 70. So it's obviously a critical system asset for us. Additional investments, I'll touch on. We already mentioned the 200,000 meters that are in the process of being replaced. Again, the advantage of that is some cost savings for KUB. We don't have to read meters anymore. We get the readings remotely. We can stop and start services remotely as well, so a truck doesn't have to roll all the time to do that. That's an advantage. Also, we know when you're in power or without power. So again, we get a sense of there's a power outage, we can respond to that and look for the source of that. And then also, an important thing for the customers is the portal. If you have the advanced meter, you can go online and look at your utility usage on a monthly, daily, weekly basis for all services. Helps you better manage your usage, helps you better manage your utility costs. And one day, probably sometime a decade from now or no, especially on electric, when you have more time-sensitive rates than we do now, that's even more important for the customers to have that tool. And we talked a little bit about distribution automation. But this $30 million really is good investments for the electric system. It includes what we call faulted circuit indicators at strategic parts of our system. These are the flashing lights that we have on the lines that our troublemaking go out. If it's flashing, it helps point to the source of trouble or the source of an outage. We also have within those dollars a lot of smart switches that will be installed in the system that allows our operators back at the dispatch center to reroute power. If there's an outage here, as opposed to that customer staying out, smart switches allows us to reroute power and get that customer back in service before a crew actually goes out to fix the problem. So there's a lot of dollars there, but there's a lot of devices that are going to make our system smarter, more modernized, and automated, really all for the benefit of the customers in the long term. And a big part of that is also, we've talked about the fiber optic ring that we're going to connect all our electric substations together. And so, again, the operations center can help control load better than it can now. It's really an enhanced upgrade for our communication system infrastructure for the electric system.
Mark, help me with this. If a customer gets shut off on a Friday or Thursday or Friday, used to be in the past, you had to wait till Monday to get turned back on?
I don't think we shut off on
We don't
Friday.
shut
Okay, I'm shut off on Fridays, okay. So is there a window of time if you do shut off, so would this eliminate that, or will we never have to deal with that beforehand for having to
You
wait
can shut off and turn on.
on the same day?
Yes,
Okay, okay.
remotely.
Has there been a time that you couldn't do that?
We have to roll a truck to that.
Right,
So this will be an advantage to the customer as
sure,
well as
that's
us.
what I'm getting at,
Right.
okay.
And one thing we have to do, we have this tool available for us, but we really need to think through all the processes and procedures of how you're going to implement. We're not at a point right now where, okay, you didn't pay your bill. Well,
Yeah, we don't do
but that's to come. But we do, the technology is there to be able to do that, but we got to put processes and procedures and communicate with our customers about that, because it's a bit of a game changer. Okay, moving on to the electric financial plan quickly. Some of the key assumptions that underlie our financial plan for electric. First of all, in customer additions, we're going to add about 13,500 new electric customers over the next 10 years. That's what's in our model. Most of that, if not all, is residential. And you can see the annual range of that 1,200 to 1,400. Debt, interest rate on debt. This is an important assumption, and it is somewhat of a moving variable, of course. What we're projecting, because we're going to issue debt most likely every year in the electric division, as we will on most divisions except gas, all except gas. We're assuming 3.25 to 4.25, so a slight rise in interest rates over the 10-year period. If you think they got to start to go up sometime. But you'll remember back in, I guess, July, we sold $40 million in electric bonds. We got a rate of 2.75%. Now, if interest rates will stay at that level as the years go by, that's actually savings for the plan, and it's not insignificant savings considering the amount of debt that you're issuing for the electric division. Really, for all of our divisions, the bonds will go out 30 years, and that's what we've been doing. You know, it's subject to discussion with the board, but that's what we've landed on. State law caps it at 40 years. We've set 30 years for all 4 divisions. And then for the debt ratio for the electric division. What we've worked out with the board in the past, and also with our rating agencies, is sort of capping that at 45%, or certainly can be less than that. And again, the debt ratio represents the total system funding for the division, in this case, the electric division. At the end of each year, you can look at your balance sheet, how much debt you have, what's your retained earnings, what used to be called retained earnings, and you calculate how has your system been funded, basically. And so the target for the electric is 45% or less. Any questions on it? Looking at the 10-year electric capital program, by far the largest of the capital programs at $750 million. And some of the key components we talked about, from grid modernization, from poles, substations, overhead transmission lines, et cetera. So that's an average of $75 million per year. You'll note there's a couple of years that it exceeds that, especially in the next few years. That's the additional dollars for the grid modernization program. How are you going to fund it? The sources, debt 38%, revenue 62%, so $288 million in long-term bonds we anticipate selling over the next 10 years to help fund the electric capital program. System revenues are the balance. Look at the debt profile of the electric division. Right now, we have a debt ratio of about 43%, and that's what this chart here is, I'm sorry. The orange portion represents the debt portion of system funding. The blue is equity or net revenue. 43%, it's going to increase gradually and actually go up to 46% a couple of years, which is hard to tell on this chart. And then it'll actually trend down a little bit and it would end around 41%. The debt ratio, the debt service coverage, which is an indicator that the rating agencies really look at to see how well, sort of a stress test for how you can repay your debt. And the higher the better. What we've settled on with the rating agencies is a target of 3.0, and that is to keep in line with a AA rated public power utility. And you can see we are projected to be at that or slightly above that most of the years. The last 2 years of the plan, we get some, one of the existing bond issues is retired, so it becomes more than that. But so debt stays about the level that we've had it as far as from a total system funding perspective. Not a whole lot of flexibility here, especially in some of these years, but we are meeting the target level. Okay, talk about electric rates for a moment. Where do we see the rate increases in this plan? As I mentioned, really for all of the systems, we see a continuation of annual increases over time. What we're seeing for the electric system for the next 3 years is essentially an increase of 2%, 2%, and 1% system-wide. How does that translate for residential bills? We sort of average that out. It's a $1.50 increase in the residential monthly bill each of the 3 years. The last 6 years, since we've had Electric Century 2, it's been a $1 increase in the monthly bill. What's changed? Well, Century 2 continues, but it's primarily the grid modernization. That's $70 million that we have for the meter upgrades, and also distribution automation is an additional cost that has to be factored in and funded. And this is the rates portion of that. Over time, though we would not ask that you consider anything beyond 3 years, of course that would come in the spring, it would begin to decline, go to $1.25. and then back to the dollar level for the last 3 years of the plan. Any questions on that? We'll talk a little bit later as time goes on about how you would apply that increase. Do we want to put it all to the fixed monthly customer charge? Do you want to build a portion of that to the commodity charge? I think that's probably a discussion for another day, unless we want to be here like 3 o'clock. But,
So you're saying it's $1.50, $1.25, or $1 a month per customer will generate enough revenue to pay for the debt that we're expected to incur with it?
That with the existing rates that are already in place, these are the additional amounts from a residential perspective that's needed to balance the plan, to be able to achieve the coverage and the debt ratio that we saw in the previous page. Yes, sir. Which essentially is to fund the
That's
cost.
it. We have not been, we haven't taken any, we've not been incurring debt for very many years. Because for many years we believed in debt. So we haven't paid off any cycle yet. So it'll be, what year will we start, how long will it be before one of the 30 years rolls off? And, because we're adding, every year we're adding another round of debt, but we're not retiring.
We are retiring.
You are?
We are retiring. For example, let's go back to this. You're not going to see the absolute debt levels here. We'll have that when we have our individual discussions next month. But here on the debt ratio, we have right now about $278 million in outstanding debt for the electric division today. Okay. We're going to sell $288 million over the next 10 years. So say if you want to add the 288 to the 278, but we're actually going to end FY26 at 358 total. I don't have the math in my head, but there is a scheduled repayment of debt every year. Actually some increasing magnitude when you layer on another bond issue, another bond issue, another bond issue. So the absolute change in outstanding debt from where we are now to 10 years from now, even though you're going to sell 288, is about $80 million.
Question. It was year 2020, when we exceed that 45% debt ratio,
Yes, sir.
will we receive a downgrade?
No.
We're still in that,
Oh, yes.
we're still in that acceptable range?
Yes, that